Welcome back to the podcast. Today I have Ange Hookham with me, who is a personal trainer based in Goulburn in Australia. She has been part of my online field team, and this is the first time we've actually met in person. So welcome, Ange.
Thank you, Gemma.
You're welcome.
Lovely.
Recently you rode Snowy Classic, and that was
I
what
know.
grabbed my that was what grabbed my attention to be like, I've got to get her on the podcast, because one of the things you said was like, "Oh, thank you so much about the nutrition for female cyclists in particular."
Yep.
So I wanted to get just your thoughts on what happened at Snowy, what changed and what was different from previous times you've ridden that.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is I ride with some older guys who are just fabulous, who used to race, and one of them said to me, I think the Tuesday before Snowy, he said, "Oh, so have you been following a set diet for this, Ange, and all of that?" And he knows I'm vegetarian. We went vegetarian, sort of. We've been vegetarian for almost a year, but he knew I'd done that, and I said, "Oh, look, just eating vegetarian." I said, "Actually, I said, if anything, I've put on a kilo and allowed myself to put on a kilo, which is daunting as women. I don't think we realize how much that sort of screws with your head a little bit, of thinking, oh, put on a kilo. Thinking, I love climbing, I love hills, and so I'm thinking, my previous thinking was always, I've got to be as light as possible, got to be as light as possible, but then would sort of run out of energy in the ride."
Mm.
Whereas I had started listening to all of your podcasts and your teaching and everything. And look, I think particularly the fueling during your ride and the day before events, I must have listened to that one like 3 times, and started to tweak and put little things in from that. It was only the week before this Snowy that I actually hit and found out how easy it is to hit like 600 grams of carbs the day before, and went, oh,
Yeah.
okay, if you do it the way you've said to do it,
Yeah.
it's actually quite easy.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I started playing with that, I just noticed my speeds going up.
Yeah.
About a year ago, I thought, oh wow, it'd be lovely to go out and do a solo hilly-ish, sort of 1,200 meters, 1,400 meters of elevation. But I'd love the day when I can hit 27k an hour average for a 100 on my own, thinking, oh, I don't know if that'll ever happen. And then, but pre-Snowy, just went out and did it, and fueling the whole way, just learning to eat and what works. Got some hills here in town that is pretty much a hilly loop where you can, over 100 k's, you can hit 2,000 meters of elevation if you sit there doing loop after loop after loop, which is a bit boring, but and I had started to do sort of 50, 60 k's over there, and I'd feel sick with what I was using. I'd feel sick. I realized that some things don't work for me, and I'd get flavor fatigue. I'd open a gel and think, oh, I just can't get this down. But then started listening to some of the things you'd said about maltodextrin and mixing, and the fact that it's not so sweet, putting it with fructose. I can get that down easy.
Nice.
It's not a problem. It's not a problem. And I don't feel sick. I've been slowly upping the amounts, and I can get that down super easy.
Amazing. So, what are you tolerating at the moment?
So at the moment, so yesterday I went out and did 95 k's, 12,500 meters, not 1,000 elevation, and I think I took it. And that was only 3.5 hours, and managed to get in. I think it was 80 to 90. I think it was closer to 90 grams per hour. Whereas before I was struggling to get 60 in, 50 or 60 before. I'd just feel off in my stomach.
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, like I think sometimes I see people taking on these products and they're burping or they're feeling a bit ill or gassy, and then but in the head that they're like, oh no, but I have to use this sort of product. Whereas that's like, if you're feeling sick from something, then you're going to avoid it, and that's where you end up with that gel pocket that just drives all the way around the country with you, and you never eat it because it's unconsciously you're like, oh, it doesn't make me feel good. Whereas there's so many different products and real food out available in the supermarket and on the market that it's figuring out what works for you and testing it in training, rather than just like rocking up on race day and be like, yeah, like this will be fine.
So So different to last year's Snowy. I was having a think about it, thinking, oh, and this is where partly, your day before stuff comes in. I think
Yeah,
last year, I think we went to the Gindi club, and I think I had a snitty and mash, and a glass of wine,
yeah,
thinking, oh yeah, no protein. I'm still getting carbs with the mashed potato and all that sort of stuff. Got up and had a bowl of porridge,
yeah,
thinking, oh, yep, that's great fuel. That'll fuel
yeah,
me for my ride. And I don't feel sick or bloated or anything with any of that.
yeah,
But then it's hard to make sense what you're saying about the fact that with all that fiber, you just can't, and the protein, you
yeah,
just can't get enough in.
yeah.
Whereas now it's Cocoa Pops.
Well, it's so this is again, it's that whole like there's everyday nutrition, there's training nutrition, and
Yep.
then there's race nutrition. And it's not a case of like always eat the Cocoa Pops or the low
No,
fiber sort of foods, but
no.
in a but I think this is where I find when people do a carb load well, it's this big eye opener. It is like, oh my goodness, what a difference food, fiber, and protein and the veggies make to the
Yep.
quality of my diet the rest of
Oh,
you can eat
absolutely.
this huge amount of food and you're still
Yep.
hungry and you're like, how am I
Yep.
still hungry? I just ate 600 grams of
Yep.
carbs here.
Yeah, and that's where it started to make sense because, as you said, like it's all the foods you think, oh no, they're the unhealthy foods. I shouldn't be eating all of that. Like,
Yeah,
it's the empty calories that we tell people. In my fitness business, I'm sort of talking to people about having fiber, having protein, steering
yeah,
clear of empty calories for the most part, except for a bit of fun. Um, you know, uh, but then flipping it and thinking, oh, okay, in the pre-race, they're
yeah,
all the things that I need to have, and realizing, yeah, because they make you still feel hungry, I could do it easily, um,
yeah.
without,
Because it's like we're so limited in what we're able to absorb and consume during exercise, and we're expending far beyond what we're consuming. And then, especially when you go and do like these 5, 6, 7, 8 hour days and these events, these grand fonda big days out, then
Yep,
the deficit, this constant little deficit that just keeps growing and growing and growing. Like by having that more the day before, you go in with extra reserves, so you last longer on the day, and then the fueling
absolutely.
during it helps you maintain that intensity and that speed versus you get
Yep.
halfway through and you're like, oh my goodness, can someone push me the rest of the way, please?
Oh, exactly. Like last year, I stopped at the first fuel stop. This time, I didn't stop at one.
Really?
Last year, I had to get off my bike up Beloka.
Yeah,
I, my heart
yeah.
rate,
That's a
I,
climb and a half.
my heart rate had just gone through the roof. This year, I'd sort of sat at a nearly 33K average to Beloka, and
Yeah,
then was still able to climb and sort of be overtaking people on the climb, feeling like, oh, yep, this is fine, and got to the top, didn't have to stop at the fuel stop, and just had the power to push for that last, I don't know, 15, whatever it is, K's back
yeah,
home, in back to Gindi, and kind of went, oh, I'm feeling fine. Last year, I've sort of thought, oh, at some stage, maybe 3 or 4 years down the track, I'd love to try the 170. Whereas
yeah,
now I've signed up for it next year because I kind of went, oh, wow, yep, it is doable,
yeah.
if I feel properly. Yeah.
100%. And I mean, I did Snowy, I think 2 years ago, and I wasn't fit because I hadn't been riding. It was like in the middle of all that rain in Oz,
Hmm.
and I'd been barely sort of riding, but I knew that if I fueled well, I'd be able to maintain the like a constant sort of speed, like not win any awards or anything, but finish the ride. It felt great during the ride because of eating well the day before and eating well during it. And I believe you were your first woman, is that correct?
No, yeah, yeah.
First female, amazing.
17 minutes, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't have to stop. I managed to stick in with a lot of the 170 guys that were going through, and just sit in their bunch, and felt quite comfortable, and didn't feel like, oh, I'm dropping off the back, or anything like that. I was able to sit with them, and just keep up that pace, and got back to Jindabyne. Yeah, I had a beer, but I didn't feel like, I didn't feel hungry. I didn't feel like, oh, I've
yeah,
got to go eat. Whereas my husband used to laugh when I first got into cycling. I think we went and did like maybe 35 kilometers. And on the way back in, I said, oh, I've got to get home. I just want to eat all the food.
yeah,
I just, all the food. Um, and I think like blood glucose level had just dropped like nothing else.
yeah.
Whereas, yeah, coming
And
in
and
from
I
those,
find
I
like
feel like
I,
I'm hungry.
well, I suppose that well, this is goes back to what you talked before about the weight, and weight doesn't necessarily dictate the fastest or the strongest sort of version of you. And so it's interesting
Mhm.
that your weight has actually gone up, but you're
Yeah,
faster and potentially leaner, maybe with more muscle mass
yeah.
and everything as well, versus trying to keep the weight low, maybe getting sick all the time, underperforming, being hungry, being tired. And
And
so I think that's,
craving carbs all the time. And
yeah.
I've noticed that even with my cycle. So going to the female side of things,
Mm,
um, we know that there's certain times in the cycle where you'll crave carbs more than others.
yeah.
But since fueling more on the bike, I haven't noticed that as much. As
Interesting.
certain parts of my cycle going, oh, I just want chocolate. I just want
Yeah.
lollies or whatever. Um, the last couple of cycles, I haven't noticed that to,
Interesting.
at
Yeah.
all. Kind of going, oh, that's weird. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because I find that probably the biggest reason and the biggest struggle I have convincing women, especially, to eat and to fuel is these food fears, especially around weight gain. And this sort of like, oh, if I eat more, I'm going to gain weight. And this mentality of like, I've got to eat as little as possible and less is more. Whereas I think
yeah,
usually what I'm doing with people is getting them to eat more, but it's more at the right time and the right kinds of foods for what you need. And if you're doing a 3 4 hour bike ride, you're going to need a lot more energy on that day. You might need double the energy of a normal day, but that rather than being in that reactive play catch up, it's like we add it into the training. You feel better. You finish the training. You're like, okay, cool. Carry on with the rest of the day versus trying to play catch up and being that habit of me eating much more in the later in the day.
yeah, absolutely, totally. And switching that idea that riding for weight loss, like
Yeah,
so it's sort of almost applauding yourself when you come in and you stand on the scales the next day or whatever, and you go, oh wow, I lost this amount. Realizing now that well, that's fluid, and
yeah,
and and maybe not today, but tomorrow I'm going to start feeling sorely depleted, and
yeah,
I'll be starting to look for all those carbs. I think
yeah.
partly too, switching to being vegetarian, not that I'm pushing about vegetarian, I think
Mm.
automatically our carbs went up
Yeah,
because
I see that a
because
lot.
so yes, we were still hitting all our protein and that, but I think because of the plant base of it and everything, there's awful lot more carb in there as well.
Mm.
Whereas how we were eating before was probably a lot higher protein, maybe above what we needed, but not much carb at all.
Yeah,
Uh,
no,
Whereas
I see that.
now,
I'll see that
yeah,
often because then most of the foods that people typically think of plant-based
mm,
protein foods like beans and have higher amounts of carbohydrate, or they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my protein from nuts and nut butters. I'm like, well, that's got a lot more fats than
yeah,
it has got protein. And that
exactly.
challenge is like having to use like 4 or 5 different sources of a protein in a meal versus, yeah, if you eat meat, you can just go fish or chicken
Yep,
or beef or
yep,
something, and that's you're done. Whereas it
yep,
might be tofu plus edamame beans plus some like hemp seeds and some tahini and some blah blah, or like and some of the noodles and all those things collectively are what's going to get you to that 30 grams of protein.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And before we started recording, you made a comment about other people commenting on your
yeah.
food when you're riding. Do you want to
Yeah,
elaborate on that?
just sort of putting the hand in the pocket and grabbing out the lollies or all of that and
Yeah.
doing it all the time. And people sort of saying, oh my goodness, you eat so much on the bike.
Yeah.
You were constantly eating, but realizing that, you know, that's what my body needs to be able to keep up that speed, that pace and everything. But yeah, getting to the line and not feeling depleted, like,
Yeah.
I remember that year, some of them getting that at Barrel, getting to that last stop and just craving Coke, just wanting Coke
Yeah.
and going, oh my goodness, where's the stop? I need the Coke.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that way. I kind of went, oh, it's all right. I'll keep going. And that was only when I'd started to play with, like, that was just jelly beans. And I think like seven glucose jelly beans is like only 20 grams of carbs or something.
Yeah.
Um, I realized out that the party mix that you only need two for 20. but
Yeah.
but yeah, realizing that yeah, the people around me weren't eating. And
Yeah.
I there's that big mentality of not eating, but yeah,
Yeah.
I had my
And
pockets
having to
full.
then put up your blinkers to sort of ignore those comments like, again, you're eating again? Like what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yep. See now doing the 600 grams of carbs the day before. I had a joke with one of the guys I ride with who used to do Ironman and all that, and so they used to carb load big time with
Yeah.
their rice and everything. So he had a bit of a giggle when I mentioned that you'd said about Olympians and that eating rice and maple syrup the day before, and he said that was pretty much what we ate.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a lot of people think that's old school now. Like, but
Yeah.
they used to do it, and I had fried rice the night before. But he said to me, he said, "Oh yeah, you know, when you carb load that day, that couple of days before, you wake up day of the race feeling like Michelin Man, like you just." Feel so puffy from not bloated, not in a bad way or anything, but because obviously with the carbs you hold that fluid. But
Mm,
I and so you just feel that bit puffy in your hands and everything. But not feeling as thirsty or anything as well, like getting through 110 k's, two water bottles, and coming back with one. I was actually tipping some out before below to make myself lighter. I was tipping not all of it, but I saved myself about half a bottle, so I probably tipped out half a bottle, but got back. And you're also not craving water or anything because your body's held some fluid for you
mm.
to access on the ride as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, yeah, there's like your everyday nutrition, there's your race nutrition, and then you've got different goals for different
Yeah.
things. So in everyday life, like, yes, it's the quality, it's getting more vitamins, it's getting more minerals, it's getting the fiber, it's getting the different fruits and vegetables. So you've got substance there, and that's your baseline. And you add the extra in for your training, and then you test out and tweak out different products, different foods, different amounts. So you build your confidence of like, okay, I'm starting with 20, like I'm going to try 30, going to try 40. And then also I find when you do it slowly, it helps with that mental confidence as well, versus like rather than be like, oh, like I've just been told I have to do this, someone else has told me to do it. You test it and you start feeling better, and you start feeling better. And when you actually feel the difference, you're like, ah, I wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That did you find that that was actually really helpful to motivation for you to keep pushing and trying
Oh,
more?
definitely. Definitely. So yeah, I used to do the porridge the morning of a ride. And I felt okay with that,
Yeah.
and the gels. Um, Found it a couple of rides before Christmas, as I said, doing some hills. I just started to feel sick and flavor fatigue. I just didn't want any more of it, and found it really hard to get it in, and started to just crave water. I didn't even want the electrolytes in. I just craved water because of just the flavor.
Yeah.
I tried those things. Then I started to listening to what you'd said about fueling rides and things, and I um, then for my longer rides I tried having rice pudding that morning,
Yeah.
and that with lollies, and sort of I my husband gave me a top tube bag,
Okay.
just a really narrow one, and look, I'd put a chopped up Vegemite cheese sandwich in there, just be taking little bits of it on the way
Yeah.
as well. Found that my pace went up and I
Mm.
felt really good. But then kind of went, and sounds gross, but summer, I had taken lollies as well, and they just
Mm.
ended up a sweaty mess. So
Yeah.
I just, this is disgusting. I'm just sticky and everything. And then start to think, okay, maybe I try the maltodextrin and the fructose.
Yeah.
Wondered what the post you'd think when he was handing bringing all these white powders to my house, but started playing with them and
Yeah.
realized, hey, yeah, I can get that down because it's not super sweet, and a couple of squeezes of a bottle, and I'm getting it down. I'd put like 50 grams in each water bottle,
Yeah.
total carb, and then the rest in gel, like the gel bottles you'd spoken about,
Yeah.
reusables, which are super easy to get in and out of the pocket. Don't have to worry about trying to rip it open or
Yeah.
rubbish or anything like that. It's just in and out of my pocket.
Yeah,
And so,
I've got one here.
yeah.
I haven't I've been meaning to do a recipe. I haven't actually done a video recipe, but yeah, I've been telling people
So,
about it, and then I haven't actually
so
had time to
yeah,
mix it up myself.
I tried the soft ones, and I found the soft one hard, but then I for snowies used that
Yeah.
one. But then
Yeah.
that was hard to get in and out of my pocket, my jersey, because it's
Yeah.
wide. I then got some of the smaller
Yeah.
ones, and
Yeah.
I find that they super easy in and out, squeeze in my mouth, back in my pocket,
Yeah.
super easy.
This is, I mean, this is the thing, like it's testing out, like, yeah, I've got two different ones. I've got a soft one and a bit more of a firm sort of one here, but I think so many people will
That
just
one's a
leave
great
it.
one. That one's great.
Yeah, I mean, these are just from Decathlon in Spain,
Yeah,
but
well,
this one's 150 mils. So, and then the other one's
wow.
200 mils, but you can even, or 250, you can even get like 600 mil bottle ones.
Mm,
But again, like I think a lot of times people have these like grandiose ideas, like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and then just hope for the best on their event, and
and so
then
that's what I used to be like.
yeah, and then find out like, oh, that's really hard to open. I
Yeah,
need two hands, or I can't open it with my teeth, or like if they're a triathlete, like, oh, how do I pick up and drink while I'm running? Do I
mm,
have to stop? Like testing these
yeah,
things out in your training when you don't have the clock ticking,
yeah,
then you can figure out like, oh, that works really well, or like, oh, that was a terrible product. And it's often this trial and error. And I think
absolutely.
sometimes people take years of trial and error, like usually by making all the mistakes before they figure it out. Whereas if you can like leapfrog that and do them intentionally and plan them,
Exactly.
you can miss it,
And
you can and feel better and train better.
and that's what that particularly the day of breakfast for me was.
Yeah,
I'd sort of think porridge, and I'd have my porridge or whatever, and then I was like, Gemma's talking about rice bubbles and cocoa pops, and in my head I was thinking that is not going to fuel my whole ride, like along with the gel, obviously. But
yeah,
I was thinking, surely I am going to feel so hungry.
yeah,
But having 100 grams of cocoa pops and a glass of juice, and because I'm a trainer and I start early,
yeah,
I'd take like 4 to 6 lollies with me on my way to work at 5:15 in the morning, and just have them while I was setting up, have my cocoa pops and a glass of juice, and I'd think that feels like not enough, but it is so enough. Like
yeah,
being
yeah,
able to do 100, Ks, do snowy, and not feel hungry, just having the gel and fluid on the bike, and then coming in not feeling hungry.
yeah.
It, yeah, it
And
works.
this is where it's like context specific, because I'm just thinking like old me, like fresh straight out of uni 15 years ago, it would have been like horrified at some of the things that I do and I recommend people doing, because you get these messages of like, this food is bad, that's too high in sugar, like, and these stuff at label. But it comes down to context. Like, yeah, we don't necessarily want to be drinking juice all day every day, and
Absolutely.
cocoa pops going to school or to work or to uni on a normal day is going to give you a massive sugar spike and crash and be hungry. And again, this is why I like getting people to test out, like, okay, if you're having cereal for breakfast, when do you start getting hungry? All right, let's swap it out. Try something that has more protein in it. There may be
But
eggs,
the
or
other days,
maybe, yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
like, I don't have that mid-morning sort of like energy sort of crash. But then you play around with them. And that's the whole thing with this framework, is that it's figuring out, okay, where does this fit? And
Yeah,
what day does
exactly.
this fit? And then it kind of becomes like these little jigsaw puzzles that you're like, oh, it doesn't work here, but like, that's great here. Like, oh, that
Oh,
was awesome there,
absolutely.
but terrible here.
Yeah, yeah. As an everyday food, it could be to your detriment on the bike and in
Yeah,
health and life. I actually laughed because I never have cocoa pops in the cupboard. Like, and I'm not into cereal. Like, if I have cereal, it'll be homemade muesli or something,
yeah,
or oats or eggs for breakfast, pretty much.
yeah,
And so I was laughing the day when I kind of went, right, Gemma's been talking about cocoa pops and this, because my shopping trolley had cocoa pops, or to go away to snow, is like Cocoa Pops, 2 minute noodles, orange juice. And I'm thinking this is ridiculous. But in that scenario, it works.
yeah,
In other scenarios, it doesn't, because
yeah.
empty calories, you will feel hungry.
Yeah,
Um,
and then it's just like reframing. It's like, okay, I eat this once, twice, maybe 3 times a year, or a couple of days, like a month, if you're racing multiple times a month. But again, it's a food for a specific purpose. Kind of like an energy gel is like, it's rapid fuel, and it's just reframing foods. I've had people in the past who, like, you're talking about that like sugar monster, sort of like sugar
mm,
cravings, craving carbs, and often it's that result of not having enough earlier in the day, and people just like snacking on bags of lollies. And I was like, well, that bag of lollies is 4 gels. If I gave you 4 gels, would you eat 4 gels? Like, I don't know. It's like, well, it's the same
exactly.
thing. And
Exactly.
but it doesn't mean it's like it's bad and demonize it, never eat it again. But okay, reframe where's that a good time in your life, in your day, in your week that you could use that if you wanted to include it, and so that it's working for you and your goals to be stronger, leaner, faster, whatever those goals are.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, I totally agree. Yep. It's
And
yeah,
it's
and
interesting.
I think a lot of people don't like think, oh well, I'm just a recreational rider, like that
Mm,
stuff's for the elite, like that's for the pros, that's for but why not go out and be able to smash a ride, come back in feeling fantastic, and be competitive with yourself. Like I always say that
yep,
the only target I've got is on my own back to improve myself and become the best I can be on the bike, because I love that. I love goal setting. I love trying to
yep.
improve my pace and everything. So why not fuel to be able to do it?
Absolutely. I think, and I find that it's often my amateur recreational cyclists or, yeah, age group athletes who have a bigger impact by optimizing their nutrition, because it's not, you're not just training, you're also working full time. You've got kids, you've got families, and you're juggling so much more. And that's where, if you aren't fueling, you're not eating, recovering with your recovery nutrition, like you're could be spending your days in a bit of a daze fighting this constant hunger and just energy levels up and down and up and down and up and down. Whereas, yeah, you fuel the training well, you train better, so you feel better about that, which makes you happy. But then your everyday life, you're not fighting yourself around food. You've got more energy to be present and live your everyday life. Go for a big bike ride, and then rather than spend the rest of the day on the couch, you can be like, all right, cool. Like, what are we going to do today, this weekend?
Yeah,
I've got
exactly.
energy to still do stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So yesterday doing that 110 Ks came in the door, and yeah, I felt tired, fatigued from doing 110 K. Oh no, sorry, 95 Ks yesterday. 95 Ks, but getting in the door, my daughter was here. I bake for a cafe here in town, so I had baking to do. I had a whole heap of different things to do, but not feeling like all I want to do is lie on the floor or the lounge or whatever and lie
Mm.
here and can't get up and do anything.
Yeah, so your
Yeah.
quality of life improves and everything for
Mm.
sure. I'd be
Yeah.
interested to hear like what was kind of like the catalyst for you to want to start getting help or to reach out or and join my online program.
I'm trying to think. I think partly seeing some of your little clips and things and thinking, okay, Gemma knows some stuff. um, yeah, but but it takes it. Look, it took a little while. You know,
Mm.
it's like you see something, and it takes a little while for you to suddenly think, okay, maybe there's something in this,
Yeah.
um, and realizing that it's not just about coming in the door and grabbing whatever you can eat, but actually, if you do it differently on the bike. I don't know. I think being competitive with myself and thinking, okay,
Yeah.
I knew there for a while that I was probably doing everything training wise,
Yeah.
80% training wise. I was happy. I've upped my Ks. I've been able to do that, which is great. I
Yeah.
ended up getting a carbon fiber bike. Got a new bike. So there's those little tweaks. Um, but I kind of suspected that the part of the jigsaw puzzle that was missing was the nutrition side of it, which is silly
Yeah.
because I'm passionate about nutrition. I love looking into nutrition. I love it.
Yeah.
But realizing that, okay, I've played around with these sort of parts, but knowing in the back of my mind that probably nutrition wise, I was doing things right for health,
Yeah.
and to be a healthy individual and um, to not get sick and be able to operate. But realizing that there was a part of nutrition as far as, okay, if I play with this part, let's see
Yeah.
what happens when I'm on the bike and see what happens after I get off the bike. And the first few times I thought it was a fluke. Like when I'd come in, had an amazing ride and be looking at my average speed and my pace and that and going, I'm sure that's a fluke, to the point where the next time I'd go to do it, I'd almost feel a little bit nervous thinking,
Yeah.
was that a fluke? Was that a fluke? But then getting the same result every time I tried it and thinking, okay, Gemma's onto something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting you said about how it took you a bit of a while of listening. I mean, I find sometimes I have people following me for like years
Mm,
and watching my stuff before they actually do something.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you can completely like transform everything in like 3
Yeah,
months. Like,
yeah.
whereas I'm like, you sometimes you just want to shake him like, it's so easy. Like, but when you figure out like the right puzzle pieces, but I find that it is more about that psychology sort of piece and the fears of like, oh,
Mm,
but like I don't want to gain weight, and like,
mm,
oh, I even had someone emailing me this week saying it's like, I'm a bit scared you're going to tell me to eat more. And I'm like, I probably will. But
yeah.
what I find is that you eat more at the right time, and
Mhm.
the foods that you're struggling with, they stop. So you don't even have to
Oh,
think about them.
exactly. Exactly. That's the thing. Yes, I'll eat more on the bike. I
Yeah.
will eat maybe more with some of my meals, although yesterday came in from that ride, and I had a lentil dal sitting there from leftovers
Yeah.
from the night before, and I was quite happy just to grab that and some rice and eat lunch and not feel like, oh my goodness, I've got to go raid some chocolate or anything. So yeah,
Yeah.
if I were to count up how much snacking I did around chocolate and lollies and the empty carbs, which
Mm.
on every day aren't healthy, the calories in that would way outweigh what I have added in meals or on the bike, definitely. So taking,
Yeah.
yeah, it feels weird to eat
Yeah.
more, but then I'm not looking for any of that other junky food on a daily basis. So
Yeah.
totally,
It's because yeah, your body's getting what it needs when it needs it. And so then that like those sugar cravings, they're just that physiological response of
yeah,
your body being deprived and being like empty. And what I think is interesting, you're talking about how that affects your menstrual cycle and cravings, and how it's basically eliminated the problem that you're
yeah,
having before. And I see this a lot with women, is that sometimes they're focusing on like, oh, I've got to periodize my nutrition around my training. Like, you're going to have a bigger impact getting the overall energy and macronutrients and the timing around your training. That will make a big difference. And once you've sorted
definitely.
that, then maybe that you'll need to, but like often it's going to be have a negligible impact for most people.
Yep. And look, one of the things for me, talking about catalysts again too, one of the things for me too is, so I started to have some thyroid issues
Yeah.
with hypothyroidism, and only just on the cusp of it sort of thing, but enough to make me feel, well, at the time, I certainly wasn't. I'd have to work hard to put on weight, and
Mm.
it's funny. As women, you almost think, "Oh, that's a great thing,"
Yeah.
but I would a bit of insomnia with it, a bit of anxiety with it, um, and I started sort of look. I'm perimenopausal. Quite happy to say that.
Mm.
So my periods had started to go a little bit all over the place, but I started to wonder too, and I didn't think I had reds necessarily or anything like that, but I started to wonder, is some of this coming in?
Mm.
Um, I mean, menopause is a train you can't pull up, obviously, but I started to wonder if there was a bit of a link to the fact that I was um, depleted with my nutrition.
Yeah.
And and look, since changing all that, and I'm not the dietitian, and I can only speak anecdotally for myself,
Mm.
but I haven't felt like my thyroid has been out of whack since,
Okay.
and been feeling a lot better in that respect. Whereas I could tell when if I started to do bigger rides and all that sort of stuff, it felt to me like it would tip my thyroid a bit over the edge.
Yeah.
Um, and in that regard, but I haven't felt that sense fueling more.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that's that whole like you're fueling what your body needs, but also minimizing stress. And
yeah,
like I really discourage women from doing fasted training. And
yeah,
often I'll see women trying to do it, and usually the reason is because they want to lose weight. And they're like, "Oh, can I do this?" And I'm like, "Well, what are you eating already?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm not eating anything." Well, you're already doing it. Is it working? Not really. And
yeah,
whereas that fasted underfueled training, it puts so much stress on our bodies, on our hormones, that it can
yeah,
send everything else into havoc. And certainly with reds, like I found that adding energy into training helps to minimize that and eradicate it. And I think with reds, relative energy deficiency in sport, I think often people think it has to happen in a total energy deficit, but
Yes,
it's the training that it's the deficit happening in training. You might be eating it all later in the day, but it's the deficit in training that is the key piece. You don't have to be underweight, you could be a normal weight, you could be overweight and still be in reds. And by,
absolutely.
again, especially with women, I find that if we address and get more fueling in training, then you get leaner, get stronger, you get faster. And like, yeah, some of my female pros, they're now using 90, 100 plus grams in training all the
Yeah,
time, because what they've seen is the impact and the benefit on their health, their hormones, their
absolutely.
training, their recovery, and their performance, which in a
Mm.
very competitive market is important.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Look, I agree. I think when I used to go and push myself with a big ride on my own or that in training,
Mm,
I would feel like there was a hormonal or a stress cortisol
yeah.
um, payment to be made afterwards. Like I would feel like my body was um, not just fatigued, but that anxiety would creep in. I wouldn't sleep properly for a couple of nights.
Yeah.
My heart rate would be up during the night.
Yeah.
Whereas now, sort of, yeah, okay, my heart rate might be up, say, 2 beats, you
Yeah.
know,
It's like
over
versus
the evening. My
10,
resting heart
20.
exactly. Whereas other nights I'd feel really restless, anxious, and I'd think, oh, this is pain. I'm paying for doing that ride and pushing myself.
Oh,
And it
absolutely.
wasn't that I thought, oh well, I haven't actually lost my period, so it
Mm,
can't be reds or anything like that. And
yeah.
it was actually when I heard a male cyclist speak about reds and talking about, um, you know, is it overtraining or is it underfueling?
Yeah.
And God, and speaking about reds, because reds is so much spoken about with women, but
Yeah.
he going, well, is it overtraining? Is what's happening to your body actually overtraining, or are you underfueling? And
Yeah.
I kind of went, oh,
They're
okay,
heavily linked. Yeah. And
yeah,
that's, I think, the more that we're discovering is that it's under energy deficit, but especially carbohydrate deficit
hmm
in training that is
yeah,
underpinning a lot of the physical and health impacts that are happening. And yeah, I think sometimes people are like, oh, it doesn't matter, like I'll see that, I'll leave that to when I'm like 70 or 80. And I'm like, well, if you're like losing bone mass, like that may not you
absolutely,
may never regain that, which is
exactly,
yes, it's 20, 30 plus years down in the future, but that could be your independence, that could be the difference between you being able to still ride your bike in your 60s, 70s, 80s,
absolutely.
90s versus having to be inside all the time.
Yep, and being fearful that you're going to come off that bike and break a bone because of lack of bone density. I mean, you can break a bone anyway, but
Yeah.
more going to be more prone to it if you've got lack of bone density. Yep. No, I started realizing, okay, this isn't just about being fast or anything, but actually my body doesn't feel under so much stress if
Yeah.
I've actually fueled properly. And I never ride fasted.
Yeah.
I so if I'm on the bike for an hour and a half and it's just zone two, we've got the velodrome 200 meters from us.
Yeah.
I'll go to the velodrome to do zone two training. I won't fuel necessarily in that ride, but I will have a banana before I go, or I'll do it
Yeah.
not too long after breakfast or whatever. And I'll come back in and eat normal food pretty
Yeah.
much as soon as I come in the door. Same if I ride with the guys that I ride with. It's fairly cruisy, but it's hour and a half max. But I'll always eat beforehand and I'll always eat after. But now, if I go to the velodrome and I know I'm going to do interval training and I'm going to hit some fast intervals, I've got gel in my pocket. Um,
Yeah.
which took me a while. It felt ridiculous at first, thinking, yeah, you're not competing or anything, like why, but
Yeah.
realizing, hey, I can push more in my training,
Yeah.
get a better result from my training, and not get home and feel jittery and not
Yeah.
sleep properly at night.
And this is why I get people, even those short, if it's less than an hour sessions,
Yeah,
fueling in those, because yeah, like especially if it's efforts or intervals or on Zwift or on a turbo trainer, the intensity is higher. You're burning more fuel, you're burning more carbs, and what I find, even just feeling a small amount, you get better quality training, and yeah,
absolutely.
just like you're not feeling exhausted and cooked,
Yeah,
afterwards and the rest of the day. So it's not just fueling for the training you're doing, it's also fueling for your recovery, fueling for the rest of the
exactly.
day and the day after. Whereas, yeah, like sometimes like those I think you talked about the cost and the impact, and is it recognizing the cost of like being in these big deficits can haunt you for days
Oh, absolutely.
afterwards. And yeah, and rather than so many people are beating themselves up about like, "Oh, I've got no self-control, I'm addicted to sugar and stuff." I'm like, no, it's just your body's natural response to having not had enough food like at a different time point. And because your recovery is then being dragged out over the next 2, 3 days, it's yeah, it's really hard. And so if your energy is low, your mental state is low, like you could have the best willpower in the world, but you're just going to
Oh,
override it
exactly.
and reach for the biscuits and the cookies.
Yeah, well, I think your body is clever as,
Yeah,
when it gets to that point, it wants the simplest form of carbs it can find, and that's the junky stuff.
yeah,
Which, if you kind of take it into your own control and just have those things when you need it, and actually fuel in the ride, and then
mm,
you are in control of when you're having those carbs,
yeah.
and then you walk in the door and you don't feel your body's not like feed me now.
And you actually then can make those intentional choices. And also because you've had all the sweet and the sugar sort of stuff, it's kind of like the last thing in the world that you want. You're like, no, I want real food. I want saltiness. I
Oh,
want
absolutely.
like fiber and veggies and stuff in that meal.
So the funny thing with Snowy was we went out for dinner afterwards, a bit of a celebration sort of thing, and we went to an Italian place, and look, I had eggplant parmigiana, but then and I was like, and I was eating it because I was looking. I love dessert. I'm
Yeah.
one of those people who look at the dessert menu first, but I'd finished that and I was thinking they've got tiramisu and I love tiramisu, and I got some, but oh my goodness, I could hardly finish it. All I had had since finishing Snowy, and I finished Snowy at 11:30 or something in the morning. I'd had a tomato cheese sandwich.
Yeah.
Um, I had loads of um, I'd hydrated loads
Yeah.
afterwards with still with electrolytes and stuff. Um, I had a sandwich and that was it. We went out for dinner and it was hard work
Yeah.
finishing off just those two courses because I didn't feel hungry at all. And I'm sitting here thinking this is ridiculous. Like I
Yeah.
want to eat
And
tiramisu,
it's
but
funny because you're like, I'm forcing myself to eat this and I actually don't want to eat that. Like, what has happened to me?
the other thing I found, yep, long ride. The next day I would crave porridge or something like that because of the carbs. Getting in the next day, getting up and feeling craving eggs
Interesting.
instead,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
craving eggs and that, and kind of going, I'm not feeling like I want toast and a whole heap of carbs. I'm actually wanting eggs and things
Mm,
instead of sweet stuff.
yeah. I
Mm.
find the body fascinating how like it changes and it evolves based on the stimuluses and these sort of different situations and the psychology of
Yep,
nutrition because
yep,
it's not just like I think often we know how we can be eating better or we might know or have heard about like oh we should eat we should eat more in training but it's the convincing ourselves to do it and that's why
exactly.
like yeah making those baby steps like starting with what you're doing and making baby steps to and then testing it for yourself to sort of see like okay how do I feel different and what am I struggling with and getting curious about like are these related and what
Yep.
if I just shift a couple of things around, do
Mm.
things change or are they just there all the time regardless?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think very much for women. So my daughter is 19 and
Yeah.
she wants to do a workout and stuff. And I've always said to her, work out to be strong. I don't want this to be about your weight or a number on the scales. I want this to be about being healthy, being strong, being fit.
Mm,
But then finding myself kind of, you know, as I said, I love hills and thinking, okay, light as possible, light as possible. And then getting into the carbs a bit and letting my weight go up a kilo,
mm,
sort of thinking, and feeling a little anxious around that and having to sort of have a pep talk with myself and say,
yeah.
do you want to be strong on the bike or do you want a certain weight on the scale? And realizing that, well, actually sitting 1 kilo heavier,
Mm,
you're actually performing better on the bike,
yeah.
and feeling far stronger. being able to push, having power in my legs and being able to push up hills and that, and sort of going, okay, which one do you want? Um,
Yeah. Oh, those
you
mental
know,
pep talks and reframing, I think that's partly where those notes, so in like anyone that hasn't used my framework, is it's not just the numbers, it's making notes about what you're doing and why, and getting all these food rules in a head of like, oh, that's too much, that's not enough, I can't eat that, whatever it is. And then when you see those thoughts coming up about like, I don't know, you can then
yeah,
find an alternative positive thought that reframes why you're doing this. Like you said,
exactly,
with the like, okay, my weight is up, but look, my power is up and I'm stronger and I'm faster and I'm actually finishing these hills versus having to walk up these hills. Like this,
exactly,
this is better. Like the lower number, actually, I'm performing worse and I'm slower versus
exactly.
being
Yeah.
heavier and stronger and faster and more efficient.
Exactly. When being 1 kilo lighter, what does it give you? Like aesthetically, well, that's all it could come down to, because I think, well, there's no payoff for being that 1 kilo lighter. If
Yeah.
anything, cost, because I'm not as strong on the bike.
Yeah.
Um,
And
you
this is
know,
where it takes time because it's reframing those thoughts and those patterns. Because some of these thoughts we might have been having our entire lives and decades about food or about our bodies or about what we should or shouldn't be doing. And learning new ways of thinking and carving new neural pathways with our thoughts around food takes
yeah,
time. And that's why I'm like, it's a meal plan doesn't get anyone anywhere,
no,
because also it doesn't account for your personality, your personal preferences, whether you're a
yeah,
vegetarian, you're plant-based, you eat meat, or what time of day you're able to eat because of work and all that sort of stuff. And so with this framework, you can then figure out like, okay, what does my day and my week look like? That's my norm. That's
yeah,
that's kind of your standard meal plan as
yeah,
structure. But it's like, okay, how can I start to tweak and adjust this around my training in a way that helps me prime the training I'm about to do, fuel the training I'm about to, and then recover from it so that I can then eat normally the rest of the day and move on.
absolutely. And I can't think when I joined now, but it's been a little while now. Like, I think it was towards the end of last year, maybe no October or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does take time. Like, it's taken me listening to things and then re-listening to them. I listened
Yeah.
to I loved it when you got the membership stuff on Spotify and that, because yep, velodrome, boring, zone two, and I'll sit and listen to to all your framework. And some of them I have listened to, and I'm like, oh, I need to go back and listen to that one again.
Yeah.
And then just, yeah, it takes a while to start going, oh, okay, the light bulbs come on. Okay, I get this kind of. I understand now, and then feeling the confidence to actually try it out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and
It's
then
like
trying
those
it out
baby
and see
steps.
if it work. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
No, it always makes me happy to sort of see people like it's because it's again, it's not just about the numbers, it's not just about the food, it's about quality of life and then also the ripple effect of how it affects your daughter, like the friends, the people that you ride with, because then they start saying like, hang on, how's she going so fast? Like what? And so then other people get curious, which give them perhaps like, oh, maybe if it works for her, maybe it'll work for me. And that's part of why I wanted to get you to come on and have a chat about your experience. Because yeah, this is the first time we've ever met in person.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
You've just been
absolutely.
listening to everything remotely. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's been really good hearing your experience. I wonder if you have any final words of wisdom before we wrap up.
Oh, I think just getting your head around the fact that, yes, it might feel counterintuitive and it might feel like upside down, but absolutely, you yes, because you're eating more, because you're eating at times when you wouldn't normally on the bike, but realizing that that will flip everything, to be able to ride better, feel better afterwards, and to be able to, not crave everything, but at the same time keep a stable weight, and that it's not going to shoot through the roof. You might put on a kilo, you might be stronger, but you're not, your weight may fall and still be stronger. So yeah, just realizing that it feels upside down, but works.
Yeah, couldn't have
Yeah.
said it better myself.
I
Thank you so
must
much for
I must
joining me, Ange.
have been. That's quite okay, Gemma. Lovely to chat.
Lovely to chat with you as well.